All right, here we go. This is lesson 2.6. We are covering multiples, not to be confused with multiplying, and divisions. So here, think of this about it as creating copies. And this is breaking into parts. And the way you're going to differentiate between these two things is you will typically in the problem be looking to prove that something bigger is congruent than what you started with, or if it's a division, then you're looking to prove something smaller is congruent than what you began with. All right. So the name of again, this is a property, not a theorem. This is the multiples of segments or angles property, and it could go either way. So our property is going to say if segments, now again, I could replace this with the word angles, are congruent, then any multiples that you might take of them are also congruent. For example, if we have two angles here, let me put this zoom window away and let's kind of zoom in here. And let's break this up into, say, a trisection. So we have broken this angle up, creating two new rays that trisect the angle. And so this is now congruent to this because it's a trisection. And likewise, we trisect this one. And because we start off with congruent angles, then each of these parts that I end up with are congruent to the parts in the other problem. Yeah? All right. I just realized that's an example of divisions where I'm breaking something up. If you started the problem with just one of these and then you made 3 copies, right? So you multiplied it by 3. Or again, you started with another one that was equal and you made 3 copies of it. Then the larger one would be equal to the larger one. Yeah? All right. So that example that I just drew out so nicely was an example of the division of segments property. And it says almost the same thing. So if segments or angles are congruent, then the divisions are also congruent. And we have a little joke here. An amoeba dividing, right? It's not a euba, it's amoeba. The only problem with this as a math example is that we don't really have 2 equal parts when we're done in this scenario, yes? All right. So here we have a segment, right? And I can break it up into, again, let's go a trisection. So if the original 2 segments are congruent, then each of the parts here, so this part has to be congruent to that part because these have been trisected. So things to watch out for today. Look for a double use of the word, for example, midpoint. Oops. Pen here. Mid. What's happening? Midpoint. Or possibly the word trisect or bisect. Any one of those words would typically mean you are going to be using a multiple or divisions. Now, how do I know when to use the division or when to use the multiplication? Again, as I explained at the beginning, when your conclusion is greater than the given information, right? then you are going to use the multiples property. And if it is smaller, the conclusion, then you're going to use the division. So that should be pretty straightforward. So let's look at an example here of when to use which. All right, hopefully you got that in. We have some information here. Cat is congruent to dog. So let's find angle cat and angle dog. It's marked with a black arc. We see that those are congruent. Well, and then we've got a trisection going on. So we've got two trisections. So that probably means we're going to be using one of these. Now if I look at angle car and angle dop, angle car and dop are both bigger than what I began with. So this is a good sign that I'm going to be using multiples. Notice there's no right angles, there's no straight angles, so the things from the previous lesson don't really apply in this case. All right, here goes a proof. This should be kind of short and sweet. Let's get my little... All right, number one, angle cat congruent to dog. And AT and AK trisect, as does OG and OF. They also trisect. All right, so there we have our given information. Number two. All right, well now, if we trisect something, that means we break it up into equal parts. Or sorry, we're not, we're actually creating multiples here, yes? So notice here, because it's trisected, I now know that all three of those parts are congruent, yeah? Therefore, if I think about this as multiples, angle car now, I can jump straight there, is congruent to angle dop. And the reason there is because we have, in this case, we're going larger. So that's why we say the multiples of, in this case, we worked with angles property. All right. Hopefully that's pretty straightforward there. And best of luck as you work with the problems in 2-6.